Good afternoon. Got a little new atmosphere. Hope everyone can hear me. If not, let me know and I'll try to speak louder. Welcome to the July 29th meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm Doug Saltzgaber, past president, filling in for Catherine Staub. Catherine says she will be back next week. We'll see, won't we? We're excited to be here at the Embassy Club today on the 34th floor of the building that was designed by engineers with credentials very similar to me. Does anyone want to leave now? Please go ahead. We hope all of you are as excited to be here as we are. And now, Randy Worth will give us a brief moment of inspiration, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test. Randy?
Thank you, past President Doug. He always says brief when I talk. I don't get that. Well, how many of us have a storm chaser in their family? Well, my family, it was my father-in-law. The tornado warning out, he'd usher everybody else in the basement, then he'd go out in the yard, up and down the street, meet the neighbors looking for the tornado. So that's how it was very, very scientific. But when we chase something, we hope to catch up to it. It could be anything. It could be a job, promotion, a spouse, education, a dream. And what we're doing when we chase is we're actively pursuing something. And that activity, we hope, gets us to what we desire. And it takes diligence. It takes hard work to get there. Sometimes that can just gas us out. So consider briefly Peter, James, and John, who fished all night, came up empty. They're back folding up their nets. They're hot, they're sweaty, they're tired, disgusted, and probably a few other adjectives. And then find out that what they were seeking all night caught up to them. So if you're gassed, maybe you need a rest, or maybe what you're seeking will help catch up to you. Now the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the four-way test.
Is it truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Now meet and greet.
Hi, Kitty.
Hi, Tim.
Sam over here.
David, be very low.
I'll wave at you, Eric. I don't want to wreck the program.
Yeah, that's a hazard. Sorry.
Sue, how are you? How are you? Good to see you.
They should have turned it on.
Well, he came in, but I can't tell.
I can't hardly tell.
Thank you.
All right. A reminder that news were emailed out this week. You may have noticed that the annual $150 tumbler fee was added onto that, so that those of you that have participated in the past anyway, the green dollar sign on your name badge indicates that you are donating a one-time $150 to our Rotary Club of Des Moines Foundation. We used to use tumblers on the table where you recommended $3 cash distribution each week. Those tumblers may be coming back in the future, but for now, we thought you might want to keep your change for parking. Hopefully, everybody was good on parking today. Your 150 annual tumbler donation helps programs like our police and fire awards, which we gave out 2 weeks ago, our community grant that purchased Rosie the Reader van for the Des Moines Public Library Foundation, our scholarships and Educator of the Year awards. Thanks to all of you who contribute to this annual fund. We couldn't do all of these things without your support. And now, I would like to ask Mr. Weather, Harvey Freeze, to introduce our program for today. It doesn't seem to matter if it's too dry, too wet, too windy, hot, cold, you can always blame Harvey.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce the president of the Iowa Storm Chapter Association for today. But first, I'd like to just say, doesn't it feel great to be here at the MC Club today? So kudos to those people. And I gotta say, the program committee is probably really thinking and setting up this talk, if you think about it, almost 1 year from now, or just a little bit ahead of this, we had the derecho of 2021. And that was one of Iowa's worst storms. We had record winds of up to 150 miles per hour in the eastern part of the country. And we're still trying to plant trees, especially over the eastern part of the state. It's my pleasure to introduce Zach Sharp, the president and forecaster for the Iowa Storm Chasers Network. He grew up in the suburbs of Des Moines. Sharp is no stranger to Iowa weather. After graduating from high school, he went to Iowa State. His passion for weather started in his middle school years by quickly escalating after an EF2 tornado passed within yards of his house in June of 2007. That was close. Hope everything was okay. Zach joined the Iowa Storm Chasers Network in February of 2013 after storm chasing with Iowa Storm Chapter Network Ben McMillan. He has developed much of the ISCN social media client base by providing daily forecast updates and engaging with his followers. Sharp began his duties as a social media weather content producer for KCCI television in January of 2016. In May of 2016, he accepted a job offer with Weather Nation TV as a social media producer. And when Sharp is not interacting with digital followers, he visits schools to inspire school children in their pursuit of science and weather. In his free time, he likes to stay involved with his community. He enjoys getting out and visiting with all the great people that he meets along the way. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Zach Sharp.
I'm going to put a little business spin on things. I was describing to the head table here. After going into meteorology, I started to find a passion for entrepreneurship and marketing. So I switched over to marketing, which is where I work full-time today in Hy-Vee Corporate as a digital content specialist. So I'm going to put more of a business spin on how weather plays a factor into the marketing world and how social media has quickly evolved, basically how people get their weather alerts as well as their weather information today. So I'm going to show a quick little video. This is a couple of years old now, and there's probably some newer information in it, but it just shows you how quickly our world's becoming very digital. can see our world's becoming very digital. Obviously, the newest stat I saw was Gen Z spends at least 10 hours a day on their mobile device. And I wonder, it's like, where do you find 10 hours a day to be on your mobile device? But obviously, how Iowa Storm Chasing Network got started is we're a social media network. Originally started to share photos and videos of dangerous storms. And when I was in college, I met storm chaser Ben McMillan by interning at KCCI. And he was their contracted storm chaser at the time. And then it quickly evolved into me blogging through a website I developed on the web about weather forecasts and how you can get those weather forecasts. And then it quickly turned into now over 235,000 followers on Facebook today, almost over 20,000 on Twitter, and about 20,000 on Instagram. So we are a social media network, basically contract for hire. We work with TV stations locally, nationally, Weather Channel, NBC Nightly News. If they need weather reporters out in the field, we're there to bring that information. So a little bit about me, I graduated from Norwalk in 2011, 2007, right as I started freshman year of high school. I lived through an EF2 tornado, which obviously sort of jump-started my passion into weather, to figuring out how these tornadoes evolve and how we sort of can give people an advance warning so that way they can protect their life and property. And as you heard in my bio there, I went off and did a little stint in weather, and eventually I switched over to marketing and have been there since 2017. So as I talked about there, so our main mission is to bring hazardous weather information updates to social media and through the mobile application that we have. And you can see over 230,000 followers on Twitter or Facebook, 20,000 on Twitter and Instagram, just slightly under 20,000. We haven't joined the TikTok revolution yet. A lot of people are on that TikTok revolution. We're not there yet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how people get their weather information. I pulled a very small percentage of my demographics on my Facebook page, and I asked, how do you check, or how often do you check the forecast? And as you can see there, basically it says every day. I think every conversation starts with, the weather's fantastic today, the weather's hot today. You can't avoid the weather. So obviously, we are in a field that is constantly being checked every day. The second question I asked is, when checking the weather forecast, where's the first place you look? You can see weather apps. Everyone has a weather app nowadays. I think some people have 4 or 5 weather apps. Obviously, we just launched ours back at the beginning of spring, but you can see second weather website, so like weather.com, followed by TV. Obviously, we're seeing a big shift in how people are getting their forecasts. More people are checking their mobile devices or websites because they're canceling their cable subscriptions today. As you saw in that video, people want things fast. The average attention span is 7 seconds. So if you don't bring it to them fast enough, they're going to quickly move on and you're going to become outdated. They don't want to sit there and wait. Obviously, we see that in the marketing world when it comes to page speed with your websites. If you don't have a fast enough website, people exit your website, they leave. That's obviously part of SEO. They want to get the weather information in a moment's notice. So that's why you see weather apps. It tells you basically the 7-day forecast, hour by hour, everything as much as you can cram onto one screen. You try to get it above, so you can't get everything on one screen. It's not possible. Here's a tornado video I like to throw in. Do you have to hit play or do I?
Oh my God, that's a tornado! Get it!
I want to leave this house.
Go get in the basement now!
This was out in western Iowa. As you can hear, the kid was freaking out. The mom was cool. She was like, hey, look, there's a tornado. I think that would be me. I think my kids would be in the background. Like, can we leave? But as you can see, it's very harmless. It's moving away. But that was a few years ago. But that brings us to the question, when severe weather alerts are issued, we drive through towns that the tornado's right behind us and we're trying to outrun it, and people are on their front step watching it, trying to film it. But you're going to end your life very quickly if the tornado moves through your community, and that's not what we want to see. So we ask, if severe weather is imminent, how do you receive your watches and warnings? Once again, weather app takes the #1 spot, followed by TV. Obviously, people want to get those push notifications sent to their phone. That's why people have multiple weather apps installed on their phone. And then when they get that alert, then they head over to TV. But as you can see, social media doesn't follow far behind from TV. So how do we forecast? We use these things called computer models. Obviously, computer models are only as accurate as the data that gets ingested into them. So that's where we have to use our common knowledge that we learned through meteorology school. So here's a few of the forecast models we use that are either US-based models, which is the GFS, and then we have our Canadian counterparts or European counterparts. The European we typically look at more often. They only have one weather model over there, so they put all their money and time and perfection into one model. So usually it's a little bit more accurate than all of our weather models that we have here. But then we get into the 3 to 4 day time period and we start to use these things called the higher resolution models. Basically, they have more data points And so we look at the North American model, which is called the NAM, or sometimes in the weather world, not accurate model. It usually, it's getting better, I will say, but for the longest time it was referred to as a non-accurate model because it was total garbage. The RAP, which is basically, it goes out 18 hours, and then the HER also goes out about 20 to 24 hours, so it's a higher resolution model. So if you imagine little points on the map, when I say higher resolution, you're just getting more points on the map compared to the GFS, which looks out for 2 weeks. It has further grid points when it does its calculations. Now the day of, we look at these things called the actual analysis. We look at soundings. They launch weather balloons. The closest weather balloons here in the state of Iowa, they launch one in Omaha and one in the Quad Cities. So there's the National Weather Service offices that cover the state. You have Omaha, Des Moines, Quad Cities. You have one up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota area. And then you have La Crosse, Wisconsin. So that covers the entire state of Iowa Weather Service offices. So we have 5 that cover Iowa. We look at all the models. We look at all the soundings. This is called a mesoplot. Basically, the red numbers are temperatures, the blues are dew points, the wind barbs obviously are pointing to our direction of the wind. The actual arrow, the flags on those indicate how strong the winds are. So we look for fronts, we look for basically backing of the winds when we're out there storm chasing to try to determine the best areas that severe storms will develop. Here's the soundings that the weather balloons indicate. So on the far right there, you can see the change with wind direction. We call that veering. When we look at veering, we see if there's a potential for severe storms to rotate. If we get that veering, that's when we start to get those tornado potentials. If all the winds are pointed in the same direction, that's usually typically your more damaging wind threat. The red is the temperature, the green is the dew point. So we look at how much CAPE. You can see there's a shaded area between the level of free convection, allowing that parcel to quickly rise throughout the atmosphere without any forces on it. So the amount of CAPE, convective available potential energy, that just determines how much energy is in the atmosphere for that storm to develop and quickly grow upscale. The more CAPE we have, the more severe that storm could be. And obviously we look for if there's any capping inversion. Basically the warm air aloft prevents from the storms from developing. So we look at these weather balloon launches. We look, the models output this as well. So we look at what the models output, and we all determine what the severe weather threats will be. Now, for severe thunderstorms to develop, you need moisture, you need that lift, you need that unstable air or the CAPE, and then you can get that lift in 2 different types. Obviously, topography plays an effect, like the Rocky Mountains out there, out to the west, or cold fronts, warm fronts, stationary fronts, dry lines. So you typically see those as the red line, the blue line, the yellow line. If you watch TV, you see different lines on the map. Those are your different fronts. That can help lift those storms, and then when they become severe, you have to have hail that is quarter size or larger, and winds at least 58 miles an hour or greater. You have to have one of the 2, or you can have both. Obviously, if you get a tornado, you can also have a severe thunderstorm warning, but usually by that time, you get a tornado warning. Here's the different types of clouds. Obviously, the ones on the far right are your towering cumulonimbus clouds. We love those because they're usually your thunderstorms there. They start out as cumulus clouds on the bottom left there, and eventually they get enough vertical development that they form those big towers. Otherwise, you have your cirrus clouds, which are your high, wispy, thin clouds. The stratus clouds are when you have, gray, cloudy skies and it's like dreary all day. Those are your stratus clouds out there. Either they're altostratus, which alto is mid, or you just have your stratus clouds, which are your low-level clouds out there. So there are your different cloud types out there. Obviously, once again, we love the ones that are on the right. How tornadoes form, you need 2 key ingredients. You need that warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico mixing with that cool air from Canada. Once you get those 2 rivalries fighting each other, you start to get some instability out there. Then you start to get the horizontal spinning effect. And if you think about it, the air is rotating horizontally, but then once you get that lift, it starts to rotate that horizontal spin, then you start to get that vertical spin. And then that's when you start to see that funnel cloud develop. And they always say, if you think about a ballerina, when they pull their arms in, they actually cause their motion to spin faster. And that's essentially what the storm does. The storm begins to wrap up, pulling itself tighter, and as it pulls it in tighter, it begins to spin faster, and that's when we start to see more of a rotation to it, and that's when you start to see the higher wind speeds within those tornadoes. Some fun facts about tornadoes: they can move anywhere from 30 miles an hour to 70 miles an hour. We saw that in Illinois a few years ago. Just imagine a tornado moving at interstate speed, so you have no time to prepare. That's why on days like that, when storm motions can be 70 miles an hour, you want to make sure you're already in your basement before the storm develops, because obviously you're not going to have very much of a lead time. The average lead time today is 14 minutes. Obviously that's come a long ways since the 70s and 80s, but we still are discussing about lead times, because obviously how much time is too much time. If we give you an hour to be prepared for a tornado, what are you gonna do with that hour? Are you gonna go shopping and come back, and then, or you're gonna clean the house and then be like, I got 2 minutes left, I got it, okay, you know, so it's like, how much time is too much time? Obviously, we wanna give you as much time as possible, so either A, I don't recommend it, you can outdrive the storm and go somewhere else, or B, get in your shelter and be prepared. So obviously, there's some discussion around that of how much time is still too much time. The average tornado typically moves from southwest to northeast, and obviously they can happen any time of the day, any time of the year. We've seen tornadoes in December, January. They're typically less common, but if we get a nice little warm spell in December and January, we've seen time and time again, they can typically happen. There's your EF scale. The EF stands for Enhanced Fujita. Back in the day before 2007, it was just the F scale for Fujita. Dr. Fujita developed it. He was a scientist from Japan, and back in 2007 they enhanced it and tweaked it to be an accurate representation based on the damage surveys that they conducted. As you can see, an F5 is the highest it goes, and that's anything over wind speeds of 200 miles an hour. If anyone watched the movie Twister, that's a very inaccurate movie. Because they're sitting there watching storms develop, and they said, it's an F5. Oh, you can't rate it until after it causes damage. If a tornado hits anything, you're not going to get a tornado rating, so either it's going to become an EF unknown because it caused no damage, or it's going to be an EF 0 because it caused no damage. So there's that EF scale on the side. I like to show this video. This was the day that storms were moving at 70 miles an hour. I'll preference this one. This gentleman was on the second level of his home. His wife was in the basement. They were an elderly couple, so he was unable to quickly get down to his basement. So he was filming this out his window. This was an EF4 tornado, and I'll just sort of show you the power.
Oh,
If you mind hit play, it will play.
Hold on. Here, you stop.
Yep, I'm good.
Stop touching. Okay.
Stop touching.
Okay, you try to play. It's funny.
Is there a play button on the?
It's not really.
There it goes. So if you just watch the house in the forefront here, and over across the street, it'll sort of give you an idea of how powerful these tornadoes are. It sounds like you can't see anything, but the time that this tornado hits, the time that tornado leaves, is roughly about 40 seconds. As you can imagine, to have a standing structure 1 minute, and literally 40 seconds later not have a standing structure, the town is completely wiped off the map because an EF4 tornado with at least 160 miles an hour moved through your community. Obviously, that is what we're out there to do. We're out there to inform people and bring that information through the power of social media, obviously with everyone living on their mobile devices now, or through our mobile application, to give people those advance warnings so that way they can protect their life and property, and hopefully at the end of the day make it through severe weather safely. That's my presentation. I will take your questions. I know weather's always a fun topic to talk about, so ask anything about storm chasing, weather, or my background if anyone has questions. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious with that video,
Yes.
did the guy survive? Or how did the video, how did you get it?
Yeah, so once again, going back, we always tell you to go to the lowest level, most interior level, or interior room of your house. His wife, once again, which was in the basement, did not make it. He was on the second level, and he made it. Wow. So once again, it goes back to engineering. We're trying to figure out how to better build houses, and there's a lot of research in the engineering world about how homes can be better built to withstand these strong winds.
Two questions. One is, what is the predicted reliability of a 8-day forecast? And then the second question is, so if it says it's going to be a 30% chance of rain tomorrow, does that mean that it's a probability of 30%, or does it mean that 30% of us might see rain in an area?
Those are two very good questions. I know the answer to both. All right, so regarding the first question, my 7-second attention span, I forgot how to rephrase the question.
So what is the predictability or reliability of an 8-day forecast?
Yeah, so from the predictability of an 8-day forecast, I always say anything past 3 days, don't trust it. Because I guarantee by day 4, that 4th day will have changed entirely, or to some degree that, it may be plus or minus 5 degrees, it may have rain now. So anything past 3 days, I say take it with a grain of salt. So if you see anything day 4 and on, don't trust it with like 100% accuracy. Regarding that last question, with a 30% chance of rain, a lot of people think that that means like the entire central Iowa region has a 30% probability of seeing rain. And that's backwards, and that's part of the whole how do you convey the message properly. That means out of all central Iowa, only maybe 30% of it may see some rain. So that's when it says like there's a 40%, so that's why when people are like, well, it's raining, it should be 100%, It's like, well, if you look at the whole area that forecast is for, only 40% of it's receiving rain right now, so there's a 40% chance of rain. So now, that hopefully answers some questions.
So, I was at the fair, they have that cool looking car, truck, that's all.
The
metal.
tornado tank?
Is that what you drive?
No, so we used to have one. So regarding the one that used to be at the state fair that was all armored, that was Reed Timber's vehicle. He was part of the Discovery Channel Storm Chaser show, along with Sean Casey, if you've ever watched it. I think it ran from like 2007 to 2012. And they went out to try to intercept tornadoes. Those vehicles were built to intercept them and have debris thrown at them. Fun fact about them, they were not rain-proof, so a lot of the things you didn't see on TV is they would flood with water inside of them. We didn't know that until we built ours. But yeah, so we used to have one. It became more of a pain to maintain, and honestly, when you're trying to do a 3-point turnaround, it turns into like a 25-point turnaround. So and the radius isn't really good on those things. So you really don't need an armored tank to go storm chasing. And honestly, in my opinion, the best views of a tornado are like 2 miles away because you see the whole storm structure. And I love the storm structure compared to, being. And like if you want to be hit by a tornado, I guess that's one thing, but that's not my cup of tea.
So back in the 80s, I was at a meeting with climatologists, and they were talking about the model, and they said at that time if the predicted wind speed was off by, I want to say 3 miles an hour, 5 miles up, that would shift the whole weather pattern 500 miles. And I might have had 3. Do we have anything like that now that says how sensitive those predictions are? The model, I'm assuming the models are improved.
Yeah, so I'm not quite familiar. I'm just going to be honest with that one. I'm not quite familiar with how.
That's probably before you were born.
Yeah, you were.
That's okay.
Yeah, I was born in 1993. But yeah, but that's the thing. It's like the data that gets ingested into them. Obviously, they use buoys, they use airline data. They put all this data into it, and that's why. So there's 4 times models come out 4 times a day, unless you're talking about high res models. But the main models come out 4 times a day. You have them come out like 7 a.m., 1 p.m., 6 p.m. and again at midnight. So you have them come out 4 times a day. The ones in the morning and evening ingest the weather balloon data, because that's the only time they launch weather balloons is in the morning and the evening. The models that are in the afternoon and late at night, obviously they're not going to get weather balloon data in them, so that's why you sometimes see big shifts in the model data, because it's not getting all the data that it was at the lunchtime or the evening time one. So there's a lot of different data points that go into it, and obviously one little change can throw off a whole forecast. And like you said, if the temperatures rise a couple degrees warmer than what the model had forecasted, obviously that throws the rest of the model off for the week to come.
What do you feel the effect of climate change is on the weather patterns?
And so an interesting thing about that is we've started to see more of a shift in the tornado alley. Typically, tornado alley in previous years has been from Texas up through Kansas, part of southwest Iowa. We're starting to see more of that tornado alley shift to across the southeast portion of the United States. So we're starting to see more tornado frequency in like Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi compared to what we have to. And actually, interesting thing, last year, the southeast saw more tornadoes than Oklahoma did. Tornadoes in Oklahoma were very far and few last year, so we're starting to see more of that shift further off to the east than we have in past years.
Would you say that storm chasers are A, very scientific, B, interested in weather, or C, half a bubble off?
I think it depends on what storm chaser you talk to. There are some storm chasers out there collecting scientific data. There's some storm chasers, or what we call storm chasers, that are out there that I hopped in my Ford pickup truck and want to go see a tornado, so I'm going to go film it. And they're the ones that are half a bubble off. But, so I guess it depends on, but we've seen a big influx in storm chasers on the road, just simply because Twister, Into the Storm, and, you know, shoot, even Sharknado, even though there's no scientific accuracy to that. You know, but weather-related shows has really increased the amount of storm chasers we've seen on the road, and we've seen a lot of general public come out on the roadways, which clogs the road networks, and I think it turns more into a party than it does to try to seek shelter. So I what do you think? 5 more minutes then? Okay. Okay.
What's the difference between partly sunny and partly cloudy?
It's essentially the same. So partly cloudy, so you have more clouds than you do sun. Partly sunny, you have a little bit more sun than you do cloudy. Essentially, it's the same thing. I think it's whoever you want to talk to on how they want to classify it.
So as a golfer, like most golfers, I'm an amateur meteorologist trying to analyze patterns and everything before tee time. Where would be the best place to, because there's so many different locations you can go, and I can find a favorable one or an unfavorable one.
So are you asking like where do you find weather model data? So
What's your favorite?
So my favorite weather model data website is called pivotalweather.com, and then it has all the models there. European one, since they obviously are very proud of their model, it's a paid subscription, so you have to pay for the European model, but you can get all the American models on that website. I think there was some questions, but yes.
You have that picture up before you spoke of like a big front.
Oh.
Any story to go with that? I mean, that's an amazing picture.
Yeah, so that's a shelf cloud.
That was Harvey's idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't take it. I wish I did because it's a beautiful photo. So basically, shelf clouds are the ones that you see develop along, or what a lot of people attribute to bow echoes. So basically, it looks like a bow on radar, and then you typically, if you have the right, you have to have the right moisture content to get those. They're a lot more difficult to form photogenic ones like that photo showed, but if you get the right dynamics, you can have a very beautiful shelf cloud. And typically all that's associated with that is strong winds, but every now and then you can get what we call a QLCS tornado, or it's a quasi-linear convective system tornado. Basically it's a spin up on the leading edge of that, and so sometimes you can get a spinning tornado on the front of it, but typically with those shelf clouds, 99% of the time, it's just strong winds.
That was the face of the director.
Okay, so that was just last year, the 2020 Drake show, which that goes down in the history books.
What about the direction? How does, there was plenty of, I'd say, advanced news. My lord.
Yeah, so regarding the derecho, a lot of people a lot of the media use terms of like without notice, you know, but to some degree there was an advance notice. So what happened, or what should have happened, is those storms developed across southeast South Dakota that morning. And typically as the morning goes on, you start to lose the dynamics and you see overnight storms dissipate. However, there was still enough of a low-level jet or enough dynamics across western Iowa to keep those storms alive and fueled, that we saw them continue to move from west to east. And then a lot of people thought the word derecho was another, polar vortex type word that the media spun up. But derecho has been around for a long time, the terminology. It's just as, media likes to hype things up, they dig out these, vocabulary words, which obviously derecho describes what happened. Derecho, for it to be a derecho, it has to cause wind damage of at least, I think it's 200, maybe 300 miles in path. So you have to have wind damage across several states typically, or if your state's large enough, across the entire state. We saw a derecho essentially last night across Wisconsin. Storms developed across northern Wisconsin and moved all the way through Chicago Metro into Indianapolis area, causing wind damage along that whole path. So if it has wind damage that is several hundred miles in length, then it gets the classification of derecho. If not, it's just the bow echo or the shelf cloud type storm. So, but yeah, with that derecho, there was a decent amount of warning, especially across the eastern side of the state, because by then it was already causing severe damage in western Iowa.
Do you think we'll see more?
Well, that's the thing, is derechos actually are fairly common here in the Midwest. We typically in the Midwest get 1 or 2 a year. They typically happen across northeast Iowa or Wisconsin, Illinois area. They happen up in that direction, but every now and then we get one that crosses the state of Iowa. Yes.
But is a derecho a straight wind, or is it a tornado spinning?
So
It looked like it was straight.
yeah, so a derecho is just a line of wind.
Okay.
So it just causes those straight line wind gusts across several states or several hundred miles. But like I said, every now with the derecho, we saw a couple spin up tornadoes within that line too. So those were QLCS tornadoes. I think I'm out of time, Mark. If anyone has, one last question. Okay.
About weather balloons.
Yes.
When they release those, how long do they track them? How high do they go? And then they get them back, I assume?
Well, so that's the thing. They go a couple miles up in the atmosphere, and they basically go close to the edges of outer space, and then they launch the parachute back. And people sometimes find them in their yards, and then on the base, it looks like a shoebox. And in the shoebox, you have a big orange parachute bringing it back down to Earth. If you find one, the shoebox says where to mail it back to. And so, yeah, so they do get it back sometimes, but most of the times they're stuck up in trees, and then 3 years from now, people are like, "What's up in my tree?" And then they find it's a weather balloon. If anyone has questions, they can find me on social media, and I'd be happy to answer them. So, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Zach, for spending time with us today and sharing a very interesting and informative presentation. We're donating the book, Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins, to the Downtown School Library in your honor. And if you would, please sign it and inscribe some words of encouragement to our young readers. Thanks for everyone being with us here again today. Wasn't that a great lunch? Nice staff. So, we've got some more meetings coming up. August 5th, Joe Murphy, Iowa Business Council. August 12th, Mayor and Honorary Member, Frank County. And on August 19th, somebody called Pending. Not sure what that's about. Again, thanks for being here with us today, part of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. For those of you who purchased a smart card, which is one of these, please see Kitty or Jordan before you leave today so you can pick yours up. I think we may have one or two extras. So if anyone is interested, see Kitty, and they are $20 a piece, and $5 for the card, and then that leaves $15. Yes, $15 for parking. A little more nervous about this building now, aren't you? And if you're not familiar with the smart card, nice thing about it is you take it to a meter, shove it in there, and let it cook for 15-20 seconds. And you'll rack up 2 to 3 hours of parking meter time. If you're not sure how long you're going to linger here today. But again, the nice thing about it is you go back, you've still got an hour and a half left on the meter, you plug this back in, and you get a refund. Smart card. They might as well have just called it a Doug card. All right, with that, we're adjourned.